Today, of course, is about honoring Doug Fortier, the founder of Ekphrasis, one of the founders of Writers of the Mendocino Coast, often the face of WMC, and definitely the man behind the scenes who was working tirelessly always for us. We did initiate a Doug Fortier scholarship to the Writers of the Mendocino Coast Writers Conference. And Karen Uphoff, Karen, are you here? Wave if you're here. I don't see her. Karen Uphoff is the recipient of that, and she will be attending the poetry workshop. So I'm going to turn it over to Catherine Brown, who will take over from here.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Susan. I just want to let people know, first off, that the Ekphrasis exchange happened off screen. So if you're a writer initiator, just know that your work is now with an artist who is busily trying to interpret your work into art. And for those of you that are responders, you will be hearing from Karen Reynolds. This week, you'll receive an image. And if you wanted to get the physical artwork, she'll have instructions on how to do that. And speaking of Karen Reynolds, Karen, did you want to share? You were part of the history of Ekphrasis, you and Doug. Do you want to share the story of that?
Yes, I would like to do that. And before I do, before I talk history, I'd like to say to the writer responders, I really recommend you pick up the art, the actual art, and live with it a while. It's much better than an image. If you can't do that, or you don't feel comfortable, or you're not going out these days, if you need it delivered, I'll be happy to bring it to you. And if that doesn't work for you, then we can send you a digital image. And you can let me know with any questions or specifics. We will have the pieces completely wrapped and ready for you to pick up on Tuesday. That's the day after tomorrow. All right. Otherwise, you can get hold of me, K.E. Reynolds @mcn.org. Now a little history. I think I met Doug at the pub. A lot of people met Doug at the pub. I often had lunch there with a group of women, including Claire. And while we women occupied the tables, Doug set up office at the southwest corner of the bar next to the window. I belonged to the Artists Co-op of Mendocino, and I knew he was the president of the Writers Club. So when I had an idea that the two organizations might collaborate in some way, I took a seat at the west end of the bar for a conference. Excuse me. Had to silence somebody.
Make sure everybody else's speaker is off, please.
Yes. When we got together at the bar there, we talked about possibilities. We refined a concept, and we took a proposal to our respective board meetings, and there was an enthusiastic acceptance. Somewhere along the way, Susan Bono provided the perfect title of Ekphrasis, and that was great. The result was the artist-writer exchange, and that we have enjoyed for what is now 11 years. Doug's facilitation and involvement was really key to its success. He contributed as an author, of course, but he also took the photos that became the annual slideshow to accompany the readings, and he probably did a lot behind the scenes that I don't even know about. But when COVID occurred, that precipitated a little bit of creativity, and we came up with online versions for our gallery exhibitions. And of course, Zoom, like this one, has allowed us to continue to be active in our presentations. Doug was there at its beginnings and contributed to its evolution, and we thank him for making it a tradition. Okay.
Thanks, Karen. For the Susan Bono actually was doing the word a day, and the definition actually came up as ekphrasis one day, and ekphrasis means art interpreting art. So that's the other little side story to that. And of course, Doug said, "Oh my gosh, that's perfect." So ekphrasis it was. So next, we're going to attempt to show a slide. So we thought it would be fun, since ekphrasis is art interpreting art. We're going to have the first piece is called Dopo la Peste, read by Nancy Wallace Nelson. And this was Doug's response to Sharon Garner's Night Bridge in Venice.
Wow, I hadn't seen the image. Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. Yes. Dopo la Peste by our Doug Fortier. To live, me, my wife, Melina, and her mother, Antoinetta, had to leave our house at Calle dei Morti, Street of the Dead in Venice, because of the plague. There is an irony there. I took this photo in the middle of March, around midnight, after we'd finished packing. We went to our summer home in the mountains outside Locarno, 50 kilometers west of Turin, a 4-hour drive. Our two sons, Marco and Lodovico Vic, who were living at home at that time, wanted to stay at their jobs with their friends, and they could not be convinced to leave. They did not understand our worry, but when you're in your 20s, you're fearless. Locarno has 2,000 residents in the territory of Gran Paradiso National Park, where we usually got away from the heat from mid-July to mid-September. That March, walking every day, we saw many more marmots, chamois, and ibexes. It became our routine to rise with the sun for breakfast, walk 6 kilometers among the trees. At first, we didn't see the virus as a personal death sentence, only as an inconvenience requiring masks in public and sheltering in place. But then the numbers grew, and the media exposed the government's disregard in trading a good economy for the lives of the citizens. Our mother Antoinetta became our biggest concern, and we did nothing to put her at risk. Within 3 months, the boys needed money for food, their jobs gone. We talked every week. Their spirits were good, but they were spending most of their time at home. The time away from home worried us. Then Vic started to talk about how Marco wasn't doing well. Within 3 weeks, both boys were gone. We couldn't comfort them in their suffering, our boys. Now, 3 years later, in the times immediately after the plague, Dopo la Peste, we're left with only what's most enduring, what's truly important. No longer arrogant, we've given rise to compassion for the suffering of others. Dear Doug, I feel so honored to have been able to read that, Catherine. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. You did a beautiful job.
Thank you.
So next we have done reading Doug's piece to the 2021 ekphrasis. The name of the piece is Our Needs, and read by Nadi Bumbo. And Doug responded to Karen Bauer's Coast Call 2, or Coast Call 11, I'm not sure which.
Okay, let's see, I just got to get this. Our needs. A woman with white hair walks into Keystone Park in northern Omaha, but sees a woman with an unveiled hijab covering her head. She is selling paintings done in green, blues, dark, and light, with variations of tan splotched with white and the tiniest bit of ochre. The abstracts don't jump out at the older woman, and she continues her walk, but the subtle images percolate in her subconscious, as she moves further along the path. Still within sight of the paintings, leaning on a bench, she stops and thinks, this Muslim woman needs money. She returns to examine them more closely and then picks one. It could be seen as mountaintops above the clouds, with rocky detail represented by collaged paper that may have come from a phone book painted over in the shades of green. She pulls a checkbook from her purse and selects the painting as she says, I'll take it. How much is it? Without hesitation, the woman covering her hair says $300, and then averts her eyes. The well-dressed older woman writes in the amount and signs it. Will you please fill in your name and I'll write it in my check register? She hands the check to the painter, who puts a name on the payee line, then holds it up for the woman to read, Bahija Al Ahmad. In unnatural English, the painter says, thank you, Miriam Smith. Miriam later returns many times to the name written in the register, fixing it in her memory and wondering how this woman happens to be in Omaha. Several days later, Miriam is reading in the front room, facing the residential street. A 20-year-old Toyota with several dents and faded blue paint stops in her driveway. Walking toward her, the woman painter holds a piece of paper in both hands. Come in, please, Miriam says after opening the screen door. She leads her guest toward a pair of chairs and then gestures for her to sit. Neither speaks, each waiting for the other. Miriam says, I know how your name is spelled, but what may I call you? Please call me Miriam. Thank you, Miriam, the painter says in halting English. My first name is Bahija. It means happy in Arabic. She hands Miriam the paper, the check written for the painting. I cannot take your money. After a long pause, Miriam accepts it. Is there something wrong? Miriam asks. Bahija stands. I'm sorry, I must go now. I want you to keep the painting. She moves toward the door, but Miriam steps in front of her. Don't go. Hold on here. Won't you keep an old woman company for a few minutes and tell me how you came to live in Omaha? Bahija looks into Miriam's eyes and returns to her seat. The painting is not worth what I asked, Bahija says. My aunt brought me here 5 years ago from a refugee camp. The painting is my memory of first seeing the edge of the camp. Those are tents between the sand and the water, Miriam asks. Bahija nods agreement. Miriam puts the check into Bahija's hand and says, I don't need the money. Please keep it. Their eyes meet again, and Bahija smiles for the first time. When Miriam asks if her guest can stay a while, she nods in agreement. I'll make tea.
Thank you, Nadi. So we could go ahead and stop sharing the screen now.
Here we go.
Thanks. Good job. See, we did it. Doug would be proud of us for that. So I thought, what better group of people to share some of Doug's writing and what Doug has done with them and for them than his writing group, the Word Weavers. And I'm not sure of all the names in the group, but I know of Donald Shepard, Malcolm McDonald, and Art Weininger. So if you guys want to take over, I don't know who's speaking first.
Sure, I will,
Okay.
because I talk more than the other guys. So, by
the way,
Gene Locke. Go ahead, Art.
I was just going to introduce Gene. That's me.
That's what I'm going to do. Gene Locke is with Art. He is also a member of our group, which started, Donald can correct me, but probably about 18 years ago as a break in the break times between Charlotte Gullick's classes, maybe even back to the Suzanne Byerly classes, continued through classes with Catherine. Anyway, you get the idea. It was called Word Weavers because a lot of the original members were actual weavers. We've dwindled down to just the lesser of the species, 5 men and now 4 without Doug. That book, Outlaw Ford, this book, Mendocino Inspirations, and the current book, Mendocino History Exposed, which only 2 of those are mild plugs because the middle one was a limited edition and sold out in a few weeks, would not have happened without Doug Fortier. I can't begin to tell you how much work Doug did to get just my writing out there. I know there's a lot of others of you that he assisted. On this last one, the Mendocino History Exposed, Doug was working on that up into March of this year. And he was, when his health was obviously not very good. He was still, I checked, we were still having word weavers with Doug in the last week of April. It's hard not to talk about Doug without emotion. And I didn't prepare a script for this because part of the charm of Doug was spontaneity. We could be bumping heads about what caption to what photo in the history book should be in there. And Doug would send me an email that was just out of the blue about why were you born in the backwoods of Lower Rhodesia or something, you know, and then he would continue that with talking about the ibises landing on water lilies and things of that sort. And we would go back and forth making up things to each other. There's only one, I mean, Doug did so much for me. I mean, he got those books out there. Sure, I wrote them or took the photos for the photo collection book, but without Doug, they just wouldn't have happened. And Doug is famous in our group. He was known as the comma king or king of commas, however you want to phrase it. We'd probably go with comma king, but because we're almost all looking to take out all the little words. It's one of the main critiques that happens in our writing. It's too many little words. And Doug was a champion of putting commas in the right place. From Outlaw Ford to this Mendocino History Exposed, you could see that I've learned how to put commas with some help from Catherine Brown too. When introductory clauses or phrases are involved. But Doug was the person who just kept hammering home that. I think that it might be appropriate for Art to read the piece that he wrote about, titled Doug the Comma King. Are you ready for that, Art?
Yes, I am. Am I muted? No, I'm not. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Doug the Comma King. I was invited to join Word Weavers as an observer and critiquer, if there is such a word, without any expectation of doing any writing of my own. After a very long apprenticeship, Doug finally persuaded me to write something. I acquiesced only because I thought it unfair to criticize without putting myself under the gun. Without any writing background or training, I only wanted to relate an experience I thought would interest my friends. I never considered myself a writer. I had learned a lot from reviewing Nona's writing comments over the years, so I imagined myself ready. Well, I wasn't. Before I got 4 words into my story, Doug started in on me about capitalization, period outside of quotation marks, underlining, font size, margins, paragraph spacing, hyphens, etc. He was a writer's writer, depending on correct procedure, tense, point of view, use of an echo, and a lot of esoteric, sometimes archaic rules set forth in a book of English grammar as used by some authority or other he firmly believed in. He and Donald each had their own authority, which would, on occasion, lead to verbal skirmishes. Then Malcolm would pipe up with his own journalistic style, and my eyes would glaze over. Doug was relentless in his suggestions to improve my stories. I originally wrote in the style and rhythms of a speaking voice, which was not the same as a writer's voice, I was informed. We endlessly discussed my lack of faith in authorities. I believe the other group members went easy on me, but Doug was a stickler for accuracy. He was a take no prisoners kind of guy. After reviewing endless rewrites, I came to appreciate Doug's point of view. My stories ultimately read much better and clearer thanks to his voice. I still don't consider myself a writer, but I never would have written anything if not for Doug's encouragement and the group's patience. Thanks, Doug.
Thanks, Art. That was really on point. Um, Being in a writers group, Doug was part of the Word Weavers for, I would say, 15 years or so. Is that correct, Donald?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't believe he was amongst the very originals, but he was one of our first recruits, I guess we would say. And recruits kind of reminds me of things military. So Gene Locke has written a piece about Doug's military career, shall we say. Gene, are you ready to tell us that story?
I should say in honor.
Your take on it.
Yes, in honor of Doug, my piece doesn't have the word very, and it doesn't have the word just, because I understand these are completely garbage, superfluous words and should never have been invented. That being said, when Doug critiqued the piece I was trying to write about my Air Force experiences, I learned that Doug was also an Air Force veteran and that he was quite familiar with B-52 bomber aircraft, as was I. With that twinkle in his eye and probably a creative fictional writer's excuse, he told me his tale. I think he joined the Air Force because it was either that or be drafted in the Army, and this was Vietnam times or nearby. If you had waited for the Army to get him, he would have been given some practice shooting an Army rifle, and then it was that all expenses paid free trip to Vietnam. So the Air Force was his fallback position, as it was mine, actually. And he's one of the most creative guys I know, and he got the least creative job the Air Force ever invented. They made Creative Doug into a security policeman at one of those frigid northern SAC bases where B-52s sat parked on alert, loaded with nuclear bombs, waiting for the president to push the button. Doug unfortunately got his rifle after all. They gave him that, thick thermal boots, Arctic underwear, and a parka, and then told him to walk around his assigned B-52, guarding it night and day on that frigid flight line. He was to allow nobody except the flight crew to approach. Nothing can be more boring. Walking in a circle in the snow again and again, and guess what? Tomorrow again. It had to have been hell for the creative Doug we knew. Out of sheer boredom, he would check the trigger and safety on his loaded rifle as he did his rat race circle. One night he was on the job and his rifle locked and loaded, deathly quiet, until a shot rang out. Huge searchlights came on. He saw nobody, no lurking shadows, no silhouettes of intruders. And then he felt a pain and saw a hole in his thick insulated boot. He touched that trigger once too often and accidentally shot himself in the foot. Soon he was in the warm emergency room of the Air Base Hospital. He never got close to another rifle or a B-52. Even more lucky, he only grazed his toe, so no Purple Heart. However, the Air Force was short on enlistees in those years, Vietnam and all. They didn't just give him the boot and a bus ticket back to Ohio. The base officers told the personnel people to reassign Doug, something to the effect of, get this guy away from firearms, give him a job before his aim improves, something like that. And fate took over. Doug got out of the hospital, limped over to personnel. That's the folks who actually get to decide who gets valuable training in the Air Force or in any corporation, and who gets to walk around B-52s in the friggin' snow. Well, they soon figured out Doug could not only think, he could type, he could recognize a computer. He was now in personnel, hired, working there. In the South, as some of you may know, we have a saying, he fell into the gravy bowl. It means your worst problem solved itself, all by itself, beyond your wildest dreams. Airman Doug was now practically swimming in his own personal gravy bowl. He had traded his rifle, got a heated office, he avoided Vietnam, and he got some training that used his brains. Then, armed with a GI Bill, he left the Air Force, went to school, ultimately to a civilian job in California, and then here to us in Mendocino. We all recall, each of us, how we probably met Doug. Myself was with these four guys, and what forces brought us together. How fate allowed us to know and value and love this upbeat, funny, crazy, and creative friend. We each know our paths to Mendocino and to Doug, but maybe until now you didn't know Doug's path to us. It started partly in the frozen snow and at gunpoint. It was his own gun, but still. I think he's laughing now, knowing I just outed Airman First Class Doug Fortier, one of the Air Force's least known success stories. I'm glad to have known him and glad he told me this story. Thanks.
I think everybody should know that in true Doug fashion, what Gene read to us now is a vastly edited and improved version from what he first shared with the rest of the Word Weavers about a month ago. And Doug would be very proud of that too. So I want to mention that because Karen talked about first meeting Doug at Patterson's Pub, it just reminded me of the persuasiveness of Doug's character. Patterson's Pub is a place that used to be a house, and I actually lived there for a summer due to the vagaries of family work thing, adults in the family's work schedules. I lived there with the Vieira family in a summer in the 1960s. So when it became a pub, it kind of became anathema to me. I couldn't set foot in it for a long time because to me it was still a house with real people in it. And it was Doug Fortier who I guess maybe shamed me into going there with him to have lunch and some sort of drink. And I have given up my boycotting of the pub. Last and certainly not least, although sometimes I would joke the other way, amongst us in our Word Weavers group, one of the founding members, one of the last surviving founding members, is Donald Shepard with two of his family members behind him there in the picture. And I believe he wants to read one of Doug's creations for us. Donald?
Word Weavers held a memorial lunch and I said to her, I don't always understand praying. And Claire said, neither did I. And I think it took me a long time to understand his writings. This piece is the last piece he wrote for Word Weavers. It was inspired by a prompt from a book called 642 Prompts or something like that. And it's prompt number 19, Surprises. A welcome transfer to the headquarters of Chevron Corporation in San Ramon, California, included a promotion, and I arrived in Oakland without my family to find a house close enough to eliminate a long commute. There are numerous magazines with listings for expensive homes and more reasonable ones in specialized printed publications. But online, I found several recently on the market sites with a wide variety of possibilities in the hyperinflated California housing market. In our price range, I found two. A call to the number of the first one yielded an appointment with a realtor who had to drive me around to ones I didn't want or even know I told him how much I could spend. When we arrived at the listing I called about, I rejected it because of excessive street traffic and its lack of a backyard big enough for our 3 kids and a dog. The other one intrigued me because the call didn't go to a real estate company. It went to Docky, Marvis, Shane and Stewart, the law firm charged with selling the house as part of a client's estate. I made an appointment with one of the staff lawyers for that afternoon. In a modern office building in San Ramon, I liked the mix of styles, all expensive paneling, furniture and flower arrangements. Julia Davenport led me from the reception desk to a small conference room with a view of the courtyard below. You caught the listing on its first day. Even though we do real estate law, among other types, the firm only did this because Mr. Ritter didn't trust anyone to handle it the way he specified. What way is that? He wanted an old-fashioned nuclear family with children to take it over, and he wanted it priced at half the market value. I showed Miss Davenport a picture of the 5-room. He nodded. That's great, thanks. Built 50 years ago, the house has 4 bedrooms on the site of the Ritter Ranch's former farmhouse. Mr. Ritter developed his family's land, so the houses aren't new or at all newish. At 85, he lived there as a recluse, handling all his business by fax and phone. No one here had met him. Ms. Davenport continued, when he didn't respond to calls, faxes, nor letters for 3 weeks, we asked the police to perform a safety check. They found him dead in a semi-hidden room in the attic, lying in his bed, with no foul play suspected. He had a birth defect that set his eyes wide apart, with one an inch lower than the other. Thus his reclusiveness. Exactly. Do you still want to see the house? I said I did, and she wrote the address on one of her cards. I'll have Michael from the office drive you there. We'll stop in to see him when we're finished. There isn't anything else I need now. I'm ready to go anytime. Michael took us 20 miles east in about 35 minutes and adjusted for increased traffic, wouldn't be too far. He told me the site of 100 homes has the Morgan Territory Regional Preserve on 3 sides, which limits further sprawl around them. We've driven around several housing complexes, mini malls, and the 2 good schools Miss Davenport mentioned. During the drive, my thoughts returned to Mr. Ritter's desire to price it the way he did. I suspected his altruism and lack of a family influenced his choices. Upon arrival at the site, almost all the houses had well-maintained paint, roofs, and trees. The size of the lots surprised me, but made sense 50 years ago to have each on an acre. I also noticed lots of basketball hoops on garage doors, a good sign there would be kids for hours to play with. Center of the extended neighborhood, the house had 2 acres fenced in. Michael and I walked around the house and found gorgeous paintings among well-placed trees, most of them mature. The sidewalk from the front ended at a box built into the house at chest level with a door 2 feet square. Neither of us could imagine why it would be there. Fully furnished with old pieces in new condition, the house didn't look lived in and probably explained where Mr. Ritter had been found. I walked from the large foyer to a good-sized living room, a formal dining room, an empty potential office space, and into a fairly modern kitchen with enough room for 3 cooks as well as others. That's where I noticed a similar 2-foot frame and door with 2 buttons at its side for up and down. Inside, the stainless steel platform of a dumbwaiter stood ready. All the bedrooms were on the 2nd floor, each with its own bathroom. Another set of stairs led to the attic, with lots of storage space and a semi-hidden door at the far end. Inside, we found the biggest surprise yet. In addition to a work desk, a full bathroom, and a single bed with a new mattress, The large room had been nearly filled with plywood panels on sawhorses. The surface rivaled any model train's tiny universe. At its center, the house we were in had been replicated in miniature with exact paint color and surrounding trees. Streets wound away in all directions, and each house in the development had been faithfully reproduced in the same way. Mr. Ritter's life's work. The overall effect kept us both mesmerized as we stood looking out over this incredible creation. When we could finally break away, I called Julie in Houston. You won't believe our luck. I hope you don't mind that the previous owner died in this house.
Way to go, Donald. I noticed something on page 2 of this story. Of course, I have the copy here, so I marked something as if we were back in Word Weavers critiquing it, but not so much because we're going to get Doug to change it now. But it's an almost innocuous sentence that says, Ms. Davenport continued, period. Then the dialogue that Davenport speaks. We went round and round for many sessions of Word Weavers about whether or not after Ms. Davenport continued, it should be a comma, or that was a complete sentence. So therefore it's a period, which was Doug's solution to the situation. And that is emblematic of what happened in Word Weavers. Not that we don't look at the big pictures of stories and books and poems, but we almost, I would say, we almost love to do these little things more than the big picture. And that was Doug. Whether, if Donald, Art, Gene, and I all said that that should be a comma, and Doug believed that the Chicago Manual of Style said it was a period, then it was going to be a period, even if he rewrote this piece 4 or 5 times. That's kind of, that little thing in this story reminds me of Doug quite a bit. So I guess I'll turn it back to Catherine or Susan at this point, unless Donald has something to add, which he often does.
I think it should be a comma.
Thank you, guys. That was really wonderful. It was just really wonderful. Next, I'd like to bring on Holly Tannen. Holly is going to grace us with a song that she thought would be apropos in honoring Doug. So Holly, you'll need to unmute. There you go.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So I was thinking of the best possible song that we could sing. We can actually sing this together. It was written by Gil Turner in the 1960s, and of course I've feminized it a bit and brought it up to date. It's called Carry It On. So I'll sing a line, and if you want, you can sing, carry it on, carry it on, carry it on, carry it on. There's a friend by my side walking, there's a voice within me talking, there's a song we could be singing. Carry it on, carry it on, carry it on, carry it on. When you're falling by the wayside, take the hand held by your sister. Let her know how much you missed her. Carry it on, carry it on, carry it on, carry it on. When you can't go on any longer, take the hand held by your brother. another. Every victory gonna bring another. Carry it on, carry it on, carry it on, carry it on.
That was lovely, Holly. Thank you so much. So I thought it would be fun for, since we're honoring Doug, if people wanted to share a little tidbit or an anecdote. We'll have to just, I won't be able to see people to call on you. You'll have to just unmute and we'll have to take turns, I guess. But I'm going to try and do this. I was talking to my writing group yesterday and happened to mention a story. You may or may not know my husband was seriously ill with Lewy body dementia. And while he was still sort of functional, Siri had reminded him that our wedding anniversary was happening. And, John couldn't drive and he couldn't read and he didn't understand money. It didn't make sense to him. And Doug was kind enough to take him down to the store and it was so sweet. He read John the cards so John could pick them out because John couldn't read, and then he helped John, of course, pay for flowers, which was so darling. But that was Doug. He could do stuff like that, and John loved him dearly, and I think Doug loved John just as much. And I better sorry to make everybody cry, but someone else take over.
Thank you, Catherine. We need to cry. I think we're too afraid to cry in our culture. Thank you. And it made me remember a friend and I, before COVID, we would sometimes go to the Stanford Inn on Wednesdays because Lynn Kieswetter, who is here today, was playing. And many is the Wednesday that we saw Doug come in with John and another friend or two. And they were taking John out, for the guys' night out. And it was just clear they were all having a good time. And I just wanted to quickly add a little bit to the story Donald read, because I was privileged that in the last months, Doug and I would sometimes talk in the morning after that morning writing group of the club had disbanded, and we would write and then talk at night some mornings. And he was working on that story, Donald. And with Doug's love of mystery and drama, he wanted the man to be dead and be discovered by the person who was buying the house, discovered up there. And we, similar to what you said, Malcolm, we had quite a little bit of talk back and forth that he was determined that he could make that work because it was so dramatic. And so I feel like I had a little bit to do with what you read, Donald, that he wasn't, they didn't hear from him for several months and they did a wellness check. But it took a while for Doug to give up on a more dramatic ending, I remember.
Well, following up on what Nancy said, Doug had some favorite expressions, and I miss these Dougisms. He used to pepper his stories with them and also just with his verbal speech. I don't miss so much just shoot him, but his whatever was a favorite expression of mine. He used it when he was done with a conversation. Argue with him about the Oxford comma, for example, and eventually you'd hear, whatever. an indication that he recognized you weren't going to change your opinion and for sure he was not going to change his. So move on, whatever. A more compassionate favorite phrase of his was, "That's just wrong." He used this when he learned of an injustice done to somebody he cared about, or when he struggled with a tech problem that he couldn't immediately fix. Weeks after Doug got his diagnosis, he and Claire and Art and I had dinner together. And sitting around our dining room table, the discussion turned to legacies. The question came up, after you're gone, what would you hope people would remember about you? I have no idea what the rest of us said, but I remember noting Doug's. He said just simply, "I'd like people to think I was helpful." Well, this was such a modest hope from a guy who was endlessly helpful. Just for a second here, raise your hand if Doug ever helped you solve a computer problem. And raise your hand if Doug encouraged you to start a blog and then created one for you. Raise your hand if he encouraged you to write or submit your writing someplace. Did you ever need an ISBN that Doug helped you secure? What about your artwork? Did Doug ever design a poster for you or a bookmark? Did you receive a personal invite from Doug to join our writing club? Well, no worries about that legacy. Doug's helpful presence is everywhere in our community. And the fact that he's not with us today, well, that's just wrong.
That was sweet. Nancy mentioned that John and Doug would come for dinner at Raven's Stanford Inn very often. And it was obvious how much he loved John. It really was. My relationship with Doug didn't start around writing. Out of the blue, he called me for piano lessons many years ago. And here's a grown-up man with a piano that he wanted to learn to play. He had played it as a child. And his method of dedicating himself was that he's, as I understand it, Claire, you can correct me if I'm wrong, he'd set a timer for 45 minutes twice a day, once in the morning, once in the afternoon, and he practiced piano. And he came for a weekly lesson. Even if he didn't feel great, he usually came for his lesson. We became friends. He started telling me about his writing, and I started telling him that I was a closet writer. During COVID, we had to do Zoom lessons, which were not a great deal of fun, but we did it. And then after he wasn't feeling great, we would still meet on Fridays at his lesson time, and we just hang out and talk. And one quick anecdote, one day he was here for a lesson. He heard giggling coming from my son's part of the house, female giggling. He said, "Who's that?" And I said, "Oh, that's my son's girlfriend." And a few weeks later, because I had asked him, "Where do you get your ideas for stories from?" So a few weeks later, he presented me with a story that was called Krasnaya Tripalowski. And if you've read it, you would know that it's about a ventriloquist and his relationship with another ventriloquist and a female dummy. He had made some joke while he was listening to them giggling. He said, "Oh, I thought maybe he had a dummy in there and he was practicing." So I was just delighted to kind of see how his mind jumped from, "Oh, here's a funny incident," to, "Oh, I can use the germ of that to create something totally different," but there was the germ of it. And I have favorite phrases that he said, and he said it to me often. when I would dither about, whether I wanted to sing, he'd say, just do it. Miss you, Doug. Love you, Claire.
I have a small piece that I wrote called Wishes. Our connection started by accident. I'd called in a favor he could no longer deliver, which told me how long I'd been immersed in my own saga. We agreed to stay in touch, to compare shut-in notes. I should have known this time the call was goodbye. In a way, I did. We spoke of our limitations, our goals. Mine were positive, probably unrealistically so. His were simple, determined, and final. He was on his way to an appointment out of town. I wished him luck. Whatever you want that to be, I said. He sighed and thanked me for our phone times. It was a costly trip, packing oxygen to spare, but not much hope. 2 days later, I learned he'd reached the end of the road.
I didn't know Doug as long as most of you. But I remember his immediate welcoming when he met me. And a number of lunches at the West End bar. I don't have any deep personal stories to share, except that I felt like I'd known him for a lot longer than I did. And when he finally left us, I felt like I hadn't known him nearly long enough. Be good to yourself, Claire. We'll do our best to be good to you too.
I didn't know Doug a long time either. We moved here just about 5 years ago, but as people said, he was always so helpful and so welcoming. And a lot of my relationship with Doug was through email around submissions of photography or making a comment about the website or letting him know I had a poem published. He was always interested in promoting that. So I felt so supported by him. And this isn't a very good poem, but it's called Found Words from Doug's Emails to Me. But I wanted to do something to honor him. So this is it. All these are words from Doug. Exactly what you want. Happy to have you with us. Bio, picture, title of poem, done. Thank you, thank you. Even better, someone looks at the website, letting us know. So please, a needed change. Resonates with me. Continuity of perspective. Fairly quickly, 8 anthology photos. All quite troubling. Thank you for your kind words. Positive attitude. My old self or something close. I'll find it. This is me hollering. Can't find any entry. KZYX archives. I'll find it. Blush the first time. Jack London Award second time. Appreciate your kind words. Keep writing.
I'm just going to take a minute because I'm not with your group, but Doug was our steadfast substitute portrait group sitter when we were at the Quebec studio in Mendocino, and we had these weekly portrait drawings. And if somebody chickened out at the last minute, he would always. So, and then we used to pay the sitter with our drawing or painting. He didn't want them. He said, nah, I don't want them. So I've got more of him than anybody else, which is a real treasure. So that's all. That was just one of many stories, but thank you for letting me share that.
I would like to offer something. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I'm not in the thick of things up in Fort Bragg, so many of you may not know me or we don't see each other often. I'm way out here in the sticks of Albion, you know. But I don't even remember when I first met Doug, but I do remember that he taught me how to make, I mean, this is real. I didn't know how to make docs to send in, and I wanted to submit something. And so he taught me and worked with me, and ultimately the first time sent it in for me because I could not do it on my computer. My computer was old and wasn't acting right. He taught me many things about, you know, the tech stuff, but even beyond that, anytime I had a piece that I was writing, working on, whether I was stuck a little or not stuck, I just needed someone to read it to, he would always be there to listen to me and offer comments if I asked for them. He was a very humble person and a very entertaining one as well. And we got together on occasions and had some tea and talked about stuff and by the way, he also honored me by creating a character in one of his stories after me, which was really a very sweet thing to do. I'm not going to tell you which character it is. You're going to have to guess. I'll tell you if you find out. If you guess right or wrong, I'll let you know. But in the last year, we spoke on the phone once a week. You know, he'd call me or I'd call him. We would just chat about writing or the work or life or our health problems or whatever. We were that kind of friend. There was a special intimacy with him and with Claire too, who they took my dog Oso when I was going away for a while. I knew no one else who would just do that. And so we had a couple times together, me and a partner who's passed, and Doug and Claire, and I value those times and remember them. But I miss Doug greatly because I don't have that person once a week that I was talking to on a regular basis, who we shared so much of our lives, you know, our personal stuff, our writing and our health and our fears and our hopes and what we were doing to overcome them. And so I miss this person in my life greatly. And I'm so thankful for this moment here. Thank you.
I'd like to just tell a little story, and it's not really a story. I mean, everybody probably already knows, but nobody else mentioned it, so I thought this would be a good time. There's this class that Norma taught for years, and Charlotte taught for years, and now Molly teaches, and Lisa Lacasia taught, and all these different other writers in the area that we all know are from the area that taught this fabulous class and still teaches this class at Mendocino Community College. And, it's a great opportunity for people who are moving to the area or people who are just thinking about getting writing. And Doug was a huge part of this class for over 20 years, even when he wasn't in it. And that's because he created a published book at the end of each semester called Good Words. And I have 5 of them here that he did. And, it was just such a wonderful project that he did that created a sense of accomplishment for anybody who was in the class to be able to publish, even though it was just internally, even though it was just for us, it was not for sell anywhere, it was just for the class, but just this idea that we would have this community because we could publish something together at the end of each semester. And I know Doug said that he took it over from someone else. I don't know who started it, but he did it for 20 years. And that is a long time commitment to build a writing community. And he should be applauded for those efforts, because what an amazing thing that he did. Twice a year, he'd create this booklet.
Anyone else?
I just wanted to say that I treasure my copies as well of good words that Doug put together. And I always enjoyed him so much in Norma's class. And also at our meetings, when we had our in-person meetings, he was always doing so much stuff to make those happen. I admired a portrait that he used as his icon, of him that had been done. I said, wow, I really like that, And he said, oh, well, you can come and you can get some pictures. Some people will also do pictures of you, So he was just like that. He was very spontaneous and, said, oh, come and, I went into the building, the outbuilding there, and, everyone was doing their drawings of me and so forth. And I still have some of those as well, I appreciated his humor. I loved the fact that when we went online and he'd host these meetings, that he'd have the virtual rooms, the Sherlock Holmes room with the fireplace, or Dickens, or, I don't remember what it was, but it was so funny. Or sometimes I think maybe it was a ski lodge or something. I don't know. He'd have these great rooms and that we could all sort of enjoy, looking at as he was speaking during our meetings. He was a very, very kind person. And I don't know anybody who doesn't have some sort of story about a kindness that Doug went out of his way to do for them. So we need more people in the world like that.
I'll just say that I'm pretty new to the group, and Doug was very welcoming to me when I first made contact. And I've appreciated that and appreciated all of you. And I'm super happy to have gotten a poem into the group book and the California Writers Club book. And Doug was really a great person to know and a great introduction to your community. And I miss him, and I think he was a great guy. That's it.
Well, I'll add something. Probably everyone really knows this, but it feels like it's very much worth saying again. And that's that the Writers Club itself probably would not exist if it hadn't been for Doug, because when we were trying to put it together at the beginning, it was his tenacity and his commitment to making sure that every little dot that had to be dotted and every little T that had to be crossed, all the paperwork that was involved in trying to get the club accepted on the state level, Doug had his hand in it and was incredibly significant and supportive and alive and desirous of seeing it happen. And we should all, we all can be grateful to him for that. And the other thing is that the logo, the Writers Club logo, he designed that.
Patricia, did you have something?
Priscilla, I think.
Priscilla, rather, sorry.
Yeah.
I just wanted to thank Doug for all his help that he always gave honestly and freely and generously. When I wanted to submit something to the California Literary Review, he said, oh, I can help you do that. He helped me tremendously and never gave up. And when I wanted to give up because I said, oh, it's too hard, it's too much work, he kept me going, encouraged me, urged me to go on. And I got into the California Literary Review. Thank you, Doug. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I guess I can turn it back over to you, Susan. Did you want to announce next meeting?
Well, I did want to say I have something written by Karen Lewis, and I told her I would read it. She said,
before you start, Claire raised her hand. I don't know.
Oh, Claire, did you want to speak first?
I just wanted to say that he would be so honored And it really touches my heart that you all cared so much for him. I miss him every day. And he wrote to the very last day that he was on the planet. It was his passion. And this group really supported him in doing all of the things that he wanted to do in his life. So I thank you all.
Okay. I'm wondering if we all who had written something want to send what we've written to Claire.
Good idea.
That's a good idea.
That would be lovely. Thank you.
And didn't you have your hand up, Norma?
I did. It's not a writing story, but in addition to being a patient man, Doug could be an impatient man, especially especially with fools. And a group of us were eating dinner at the wharf one night, and the restaurant was crowded, and we couldn't get another glass of wine. I mean, nobody would approach our table. Doug took out his iPhone. He dialed the restaurant. We watched as they picked the phone up at the front desk. He said, "Do you think we could get some wine back here in the back?" And you saw the look at the front desk of just astonishment and fear, right? And he raised his hand like this, and boy, we had wine in about 30 seconds. So Doug did not suffer fools gladly.
No.
Anyone else? I will just read something that did somebody, Priscilla, did you? Somebody?
No.
Okay. I'll just read something that Karen Lewis wrote. She said, "I have so many happy memories of working with Doug. He will always be virtually present at the Writers Club and the Mendocino Coast Writers Conference, as far as I can tell. He was a wonderful community builder, so full of creative energy and laughter. His insights helped build both the club and the conference into what they are today."
Thank you all. I think we did a most wonderful send off and honoring today. So thank you.